Welcome back to Life Science Solutions, where we explore real-world challenges across drug development, manufacturing, and quality, and how smart strategy can turn complexity and maybe sticky situations into clarity. Today, we're diving into a project that we're actually hoping most of our listeners do not have direct experience in having to work through, and that's a response to an FDA Complete Response Letter, CRL, a bad little three-letter acronym in our industry, full of them, following a client's pre-licensure or pre-approval inspection, PLI or PAI, depending on which side of the NDA, BLA divide that you might sit on. And in this case, this was actually at a client's CDMO, a contract development manufacturing organization, adding a little bit of a nuance to the arrangement. And following that, getting into a return to GMP manufacturing, ultimately a regulatory resubmission and audit preparedness for the FDA to revisit. Joining me are two leaders from Kymanox who bring very different but equally critical perspectives to this work. We have Anthony from our process engineering team and David, who is our head of quality assurance. Together, we're going to walk through some of the details to the degree that we can share them, and the nuances for how this project unfolded, why it's so relevant to the regulatory and operational environment that we see today, especially as we see facility inspection rates continuing to rise back up, especially following the pandemic, and just an increased scrutiny on manufacturing, both domestically and abroad. So, David, Anthony, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much, Chris.
Thank you. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, excellent. So really jumping right in, David, we'll start with you. When companies think about the approach following a failed regulatory inspection, right? Whether it's they got a 483, so they just got, maybe a slap on the wrist or a slap on maybe on the chest, depending on how it is. If it's a really serious 483 and we're all the way to OAI categorization, or even up to a CRL where it was involved in some kind of full blown product submission. What are some of the biggest challenges you see them facing in how they approach the remediation following that audit activity?
Yeah, Chris, this is a great first intro question here. And when I think about a CRL and I think about myself in a sponsor's shoes, I think about the sponsor going into survival or like critical urgency mode. I think everyone in that situation can relate to that. That means everything is important. And there's this heightened awareness that the agency would expect a deeper dive when they return. And so what are the things that we may be challenged with? Well, and I think I'm going to take this and answer this from a positive point of view here versus the challenge. I'll come back and think about it from the reverse in a second. But what a sponsor company needs in these situations is a spirit of cooperation. Mm-hmm. That means teamwork, transparency. The organization is all on board with mitigating plans. It's an all hands on deck attitude, especially when the CRL targets a CDMO. I mean, the sponsor is putting all their faith in the CDMO. And it should be the CDMO's main goal and prioritization to mitigate and to provide the resources to solve all those observations. And in these times, it is the sponsor's right to visit the CDMO at will, as they are ultimately responsible for the success of the submission. So if you look at the reverse of everything I said, that is where the challenges lie, is the opposites of all those things. But I also need to provide this a different perspective, and that is, what if I was in the CDMO shoes? So if I was to turn the coin over and I'm to answer the same challenges and barriers about sponsor companies coming in and working with CDMOs. What are the challenges that the CDMO has with a sponsor? Well, that they're going to have a challenge too, and that is resources. The sponsor's resources could be on site for long term. And there's a lot of confidential data and a lot of activities from other clients that are being performed in the same work areas. Yeah. There's also the concern of sharing proprietary processes and records. Some of that could be out and about and it could be viewed by clients, and that's confidential. There's also as every company is trying to do business, they want to balance their resources. And so applying all those resources could be very draining, especially with leadership being mostly applied to support these CRL mitigations. And so there's these competing company commitments that are part of the challenges here. And lastly, these CDMOs, there's a lot going on there. And so there's the controlled things that they can anticipate, and the unanticipated issues that arise within their facility. So as they're dealing with this, they take the responsibility of that. And the challenge is for the acceptance of the sponsor to work with them as they're encountering some of these challenges. And so this is a very interesting question, because you have to look at it from both parts to have a equation for success when dealing with all of these challenges. They're on both sides. They're on both sides.
Yeah, and you really end up with this blend between quality kind of oversight relationships that obviously exist between a sponsor and a CDMO, and then a business relationship that starts to nuance things. Because from a quality perspective, you can say, hey, we want to deploy whatever it is, 10 people in there and be there full time all the time. But to your point, there are business things that you can't cross. You can't become knowledgeable about every client under the sun. And then you have negotiating power dynamics and things like that have business impact. But obviously you need to rectify the quality issues that led to the CRL. So no, I think that's a really good point. I'm curious, Anthony, in this case, this was a first kind of formal regulatory body inspection for the CMO. From a process engineering perspective, do you see particular technical or operational issues that tend to arise at first inspection?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there's a lot of challenges with your first inspection. I think they kind of span, many different functional areas and departments. And I think it's incredibly common for a company, that's been doing clinical, for a long period of time to take that next step into a later stage program and go through their first inspection to hit some hiccups and encounter some hurdles through that process. I think first and foremost, what comes to mind for me is your process control strategy. Maintaining the state of your validated process is crucial at this point. And that comes with a higher level of scrutiny than, some of the earlier phase programs might. You have tighter specification on your manufacturing process. You have to use fully validated equipment and analytical methods. All these considerations need to be kind of taken into account, and often, are the things that may get cited during that initial inspection. And the other thing, ultimately, that I see the most of, in addition to that, kind of related to later stages, is just your basic GMPs. So even though you've been maybe operating for a long time, it's the basics that tend to trip up most people. Having your room clean, your operations organized, having SOPs up on the floor for your manufacturing personnel, executing everything to a T, having a really robust training program, really robust change control program, things of that nature are the biggest heavy hitters at the end of the day, kind of regardless of phase. But these are the most common things that I see.
Yeah. I think it's a really good point on the process side, right? You should at this phase 3 commercial stage, you should be seeing all of the outputs of actually running a QBD driven process throughout, where you have robust process parameters that are understood, that you operate within, and how to assess product impact when you get outside of them and things like that. If you haven't done that, you've built a house on a shaky foundation, right? And now you have processing issues and concerns. And then on that GMP side, it's the things like you made me think about. I mean, whether you have a site that has a history of maybe being a little bit loose with timely documentation, right? That's a common thing in development, where you'll see stacks of product barcode labels that need to be issued to batches, right? I've seen that one firsthand, as opposed to doing it real time, and things that FDA seasoned inspectors are going to catch really, really fast. So that's a really good point. Obviously this wasn't just a first interaction with the agency, but there's a CDMO involved. So, David, when you get into that business quality kind of relationship, triangle that we talked about earlier, and especially from a quality lens, what do you think are some of the best practices to be able to get through this successfully? And then what are the things that it's like, hey, you need to steer way clear of that because that's just a minefield and is going to really derail the whole project?
So what I believe is the best practices is by starting with a multidisciplined team that acts as a middleman per se. And that's what Triminox does. We are able to go in as a middleman and we're able to navigate, facilitate, and negotiate both sides of needs, yet represent and prioritize the sponsor's company's interests at the same time. And this solution, what it does is it softens the CDMO's concerns for protecting proprietary information and records. That's why we have CDAs involved here. But it provides eyes and boots on the ground on site to help to deal with and mitigate these challenges. And this is a clear advantage. It's actually a great advantage for these types of situations. What it does is it reduces the blame game. It provides shielding. It fosters an increase in health and communications across both parties, which is absolutely required when we solve these CRL findings. Now, there's a few things that we should avoid too, because that's the second part of your question. And so I think of it like maybe 4 things that I would avoid. The first one, I would avoid closed doors and limiting sponsor time on site, because that just builds a wall. The second one would be the CDMO operating without sponsor review or partnerships. And this is like the idea of things just happen in black boxes. You don't know what happens in the black box. It just gets done. And really, this is a partnership. And really, we need to lift the top of that black box off and work inside that together as a spirit of partnership. The third one is the fear of sharing confidential records. That's what we do. We protect both parties from confidential records that support some compliance type of actions. And I think the last one is some CDMOs are afraid of the sponsor coming in and kind of taking over shop per se. And so we, as bridging the gap between the two, we make sure there's a separation of the two entities.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Just to add to that a little bit and echo what you're saying, David, I think it's a stressful proposition, to be handled. A CRL, tensions are high across the sponsor, and the CDMO dynamic. And I think having an outside perspective, an outside voice as well can kind of help with mitigating some of those challenges, like you're saying. And I think helping everybody see that it's a win-win. If the sponsor is able to work their way through this, they're going to have, a successful resubmission and re-audit, and a CDMO first-time inspection, ultimately getting re-inspected and having success is a win for them as well. So just trying to be that outside voice to weed through all the challenges and continue to reiterate that, everybody's going to win here if we can get through this and rectify the issues is a huge aspect.
Yeah, because the reality is from the business perspective, I mean, we're coming in when tensions are through the roof because there's enormous financial implications for everyone involved here, right? For a lot of pretty obvious reasons. So being that voice of reason really can help tremendously. Question for both of you: can you describe at a high level, right, to the level of detail that we can talk about here? High level, the technical and quality observations that were received or were observed by the agency.
Yeah, I'll go first. First we can't go into great detail about this over this podcast, but from a high level quality view, there were quality systems and basic controls, and as Anthony talked about, there's basic GMP issues that were just not followed. Quality events that required expert help needed that expert help, and the facility did not have adequate validations, qualifications, and commissionings, as well as specification issues and test methods were not followed by on-site operators consistently. And this list is a pretty powerful list, but historically, as we have seen in industry and as we dealt with other companies in the same situation is that this is not new. And we've seen these findings as in other areas from other companies, and the agency has pointed them out. There's been situations where there's missing areas of quality systems and inadequate missing validations, missing CSV Part 11 validations, and a plethora of other regulatory issues that had to be dealt with. And all these, they delayed the submission.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'd echo exactly what David said, and I think from a strictly manufacturing perspective, I'd say a lot of the emphasis was focused, on contamination control strategy and your aseptic operations and things of that nature.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and things that whether you're only under the purview of the FDA or not, Annex 1 is of course of significant regulatory emphasis. We've talked about that on this podcast in the past. So very critical from a technical perspective to have good documentation and understanding for your process as far as that goes. So I think that segues well. Anthony, in addition to being a process engineer, you're also a pretty seasoned technical project manager. So I'm curious your perspective when we think about, okay, we're going to deploy a team of anywhere from 2 to 10, right? Is probably the range depending on the size of the project, how expedient we're trying to be for our resubmission. What do you think are the best practices when we think about coordinating this multifaceted response? We have, technical process engineering, we've got analytical side, we've obviously got significant quality and compliance work, and then we've got at minimum 3 organizations here. Depending on the extent of your CRL, you could have even more, right? If you have analytical test labs, if you have, let's just pick on BLAs, DS and DP. So there's a lot that's going on. And by the way, not everyone sits in the same physical location. Because our sponsor is using a CDMO that doesn't happen to be down the road from them, because that would be way too convenient. So what do you think are the best practices when we try to coordinate all of that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think first and foremost, we got everybody on site for a face-to-face, and I think that's crucial. I think understanding who everybody is, building some initial relationships from the CDMO, from the sponsor, from us as a third party helping, as well as other third parties that are being brought in for specific tasks. It's crucial for the team building and for everybody to work well with each other and understand roles and responsibilities. So I think that was key for us, and like you said, it involved a lot of people flying in, but it was very fruitful. From there, establishing effective communication pathways. So who's going to talk to who do we need to escalate to, what roles folks are in, and really clearly defining those early on and reiterating them often. So we have an effective, chain of communication is highly important. And then kind of building from there, you start to map out your project plan, document approval workflows. So what's the step-by-step process for the documents? I mean, there's deviations, there's technical reports, there's CAPAs, there's SOP revisions, policy updates, all these things have to get managed. So getting it organized in a project plan, relating everything together and understanding, what the process flow is going to be from there is probably next on the list. And from there, it's just regular check-ins and trying to, efficiently use everybody's time and stay communicative throughout the whole process.
Yeah. I can tell, and I'm a terrible project manager, and I can tell you're really good at it because you got to the part that would be the hardest for me, and you just said, well, now you just do regular check-ins and project management, and everything goes well. So that's the power of really, really good technical project management that can be in the weeds throughout the entire program, right? So that's really important. David, in addition to that, on the technical execution side, right? We touched on this earlier that tensions are just through the roof by the time we get to this kind of crossroads in a program. Relationships become critically important, right? The ones that existed before, they weren't great before, and we got to kind of rectify them. And obviously things can get dicey. What's been your observation, and in terms of what works well, what doesn't work well? What recommendations would you have for someone who finds themselves in this less than enviable position?
Well, first of all, I want to echo what Anthony said. All of those things are very, very important in solving the path forward. When we first started, so I'm going to rewind the clock a little bit. We took pause and we reset, per se, and we developed a support plan to move forward. And then what we did was we recruited for the support plan. We found very targeted experts with very diverse and deep and long backgrounds, long history of backgrounds that target technical and process issues, as well as quality assurance. And then we placed them geographically into the facility next to the project team. And this allowed for real-time interaction, which is super important. And that was, we've gotten really positive feedback. It gained trust between the teams. It was an exceptionally positive move and in making this equation work. But on the same token, we also had to work on our leadership. The leadership team spent a lot of time face to face, on site, contributing and planning and setting expectations between the teams. There are regular management reviews and meetings. There's governance meetings on a monthly basis with the CDMO. And these focus on operational issues that still remain, and schedule and resources, making sure we have the right resources and general improvements overall. And then lastly, we have a daily check-in. We spend a few minutes every morning with a cross-functional team here, and we just talk about what's going well, what's not going well. We get those real-time updates, and we raise issues sooner than later.
Yeah. I mean, it goes back to just elements of, and I think so much of what I hear here is just robust communication throughout, right? And that building of in-person relationships. We're recording this virtual. That's pretty obvious, but we've all three spent significant time physically in proximate to each other, and there's no replacement for that. And then extending that communication all throughout. I think early in my career, we were doing operational readiness for GMP manufacturing and the death by meetings approach, right? Which was painful to go through, but could be very efficient to get things done and to keep everyone on the same page. I'm curious to hear both of your perspectives. David, you touched on deploying the team that has this kind of been there, done that, rap sheet or resume or whatever term we want to use. How important do you think that is versus throwing bodies at a problem to do kind of robust technical writing or something like that, in terms of actually getting both things done, but then also getting everyone to buy in on what it is that needs to be done, right? Because it's one thing to just do the writing. It's another thing to get everyone in line and aligned on it.
Yeah, that's a good question, Chris, because I'm not a fan of just throwing bodies at this. We want to put the right people in there with the right experience. And I often think about, as we recruited for this team here, is what did we recruit for? We recruited for people with strong, long experience that were very broad and general, so they can attack any audit issue that they're going to face. Because when they go in there, they don't know exactly what they're going to face. And so they need to be, a generalist, and they need to understand pain of mitigation and the lessons learned and doing it the first time. They've been through that. And so they take that experience and then apply it to the culture that they're going to work in. And so I think of an audit as like a bowl of spaghetti. You touch one noodle, and as you pull on it, it touches all the rest of these noodles around it, right? So that's the diversity that of talent that we need to place in these situations, and that's the team that we have down there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and just to add a little bit to that, I agree with everything you just said, David. And the benefit of something like Kymanox is we also do have those deep technical experts on specific areas that we draw from all the time. So I can think of 3, 4, 5 individuals that we've pulled in for highly specific technical tasks that we wanted to have the best expert we have available to, look at and support addressing, while the bulk of the work is happening, on site and with this core team here of generalists, as David was laying out. And additionally, I think that the experience is really valuable when it comes to these observations in a CRL, because they're fairly high level. They can be, somewhat vague if you haven't seen things like that before, and could be interpreted in a wide range of ways, and some more correct than others. So I think having that experience set of eyes, really digging in, looking at the specific observations, the CAPAs that have been generated as a result, and the proposed remediation plan, and verifying with that seasoned perspective, are we truly addressing everything that needs to be addressed to resolve this observation, or are we just scratching the surface? So I think bringing in that experienced team is crucial for that, to get it right the first time, and not have to come back for a whole nother round of observations because they were inadequately addressed.
Yeah. Yeah. In my experience, the agency loves, and I understand why, because their job is, hey, the threshold is it right or is it wrong? It's not all how to tell you all the details to what you're doing wrong, but it's, you are not meeting, CGMP regulatory expectations for whatever issue we're talking about, across the board.
Yeah.
And that's just the end of the comment. And you're like, but what, how, and then you go read the CFRs and you're like, well, I don't see exactly where it says explicitly this. And it's like, well, you're going to need to go read, whether it's USP or ISPE or whatever it might be, to really get a grasping on what's going on. And in reality, you need to have been there, done that. So, well, last question then. I'm curious from the perspective of, ultimately the CDMO is going to continue to run this process, right? Long after we're going to be involved, long after hopefully the sponsor is going to be there, 24/7, 365. And at our core, Kymanox's name is this Greek mashup that means ideal knowledge transfer. So how do we make sure that we're doing that knowledge transfer to equip them for long-term success, right? Because we don't want them to just pass the reinspection, right? I mean, we want them to be equipped for long-term, commercial GMP supply, and they're going to get audited again 2 years later. So if we fix it with just duct tape and super glue, it'll fall back apart between those audits, right? So how do we bring that to the table as well?
Yeah, that's a good question, Chris. There's a lot of ways to take a look at this. And so the first ideas that come to my mind is that having a team with a diverse and strong background and working hand in hand with the team that is there is going to leave a lasting legacy at that company. They're going to get high-level work product examples. They're going to get training material. They're going to be led by example. And how could you put a dollar amount to that? And so what we're seeing is that these people are learning and they're growing as a result of our team being there on site. And so there's a lot to be said by just having a set of experts coming and mentoring and leaving behind that kind of that Kymanox name, which is ideal knowledge transfer, right? So we're transferring our knowledge of expertise to this company so that they can flourish and grow and become better as a result of us being there.
Yeah, and to build off that with a specific example, we've supported the closure of quite a few deviations, as a part of this effort. And obviously, if we come in and just, write them out quick, get them closed, and say, hey, here, push this forward. This is a good deviation. That's one thing, but the team here is really working with the team on site, coaching and mentoring, as David said. We're helping build out better deviation templates, providing recommendations for how to better utilize their EQMS system. We've conducted, root cause analysis training, all these types of supporting activities to hopefully, build the systems in place. That way, the next deviation that occurs at the site, which will inevitably occur at some point or another, they're more prepared, to handle it appropriately. So it's just one example, but we try to take that extra step on every action that we're, specifically remediating for the CRL, to also implement the corresponding systems with it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would add one more thing as I'm listening to Anthony, is that if I was to give you six really quick things to think about for any company, as they're preparing to work with a CDMO, these are the things that I would leave you with, like 6 essential keys to set up your company for success. And that is perform a solid, conservative, in-depth supplier qualification audit. And the second one would be to ensure you check your references of your current clients related to the services that you are going to hire them for. Third is set up monthly governance meetings to address issues and observations. Fourth is conduct a PAI readiness training and audit, a set of activities to help success for the agency when they come. Fifth is make sure you have the right team in place, interview them. And lastly, foster a spirit of true partnership, transparency, sharing, and understanding upfront. I believe those 6 things will help any company overcome and prevent situations like this.
Yeah, really good points, David. So, well, excellent. Anthony, David, really appreciate both of you taking the time to share some insights. From my perspective, this project really highlights both the importance of this depth and interplay between kind of technical manufacturing and quality assurance and rectifying these issues. And we touched on the obvious QA compliance side, but then also the technical need as we're working on remedying all the audit findings. For those who are listening, if you're in the unenviable position of navigating a CRL, or even if you're just interacting with a CDMO and trying to align on oversight and the best ways to process things, or even working on your first BLA or NDA, or even just prepping for a general audit, we're happy to chat here at Kymanox and again, turn complexity into clarity. So thank you all for listening to Life Science Solutions. Thank you again to David and Anthony, and we will see you guys next time. Thanks for tuning in to Life Science Solutions, presented by Kymanox and produced by WalkWest. For more insights like this, subscribe and follow Life Science Solutions wherever you get your podcast. We'll see you next time as we continue exploring what it takes to bring life science innovation to life, because patients deserve better.